Are we able to see clearly? Yes, we can zoom a bit. Let's start with number 3. Questions. 1. Which 2 populations are combined? The example that we did, we simply looked at one population, people who are suffering from anxiety. Now we're looking at 2. We want to state the research hypothesis. We want to state the norm and state which test we intend to do. There are 3 cases. Let's start with the first one. Yes.
The 2 populations are Canadian children whose parents are librarians, and then just Canadian children in general.
Do we agree? Yes. The 2 populations that we are trying to compare is Canadian children whose parents are librarians and Canadian children in general. And specifically, we are looking at reading ability. Good. So 2 populations, they don't specify a statistic, rather they're just saying school. In practice, it will be an average school of some sort. Now, we want to get into the research hypothesis. What should your hypothesis be? Alyssa?
I have a question.
Yes.
How do you know that the Canadian children in general, or like how do you separate those from the Canadian children like whose parents are librarians? Like those are kind of included, aren't they?
That's a very good question that Alyssa is asking. Do we? Yes. So, if you look at Canadian children, librarians are a subset or part of all Canadian children. So there is an overlap. So in terms of phrasing, we could have said Canadian children who are non-librarians or whose parents are not librarians. That's what they are meaning. Part B, we want to state the research hypothesis. How would you do it if you are a researcher? Part C and D are related. So give it a second, think about it, and I'll start writing. So we want the research hypothesis. First, we have 2 populations. One, Canadian children whose parents are librarians. The second population they called it as Canadian children in general. Precisely speaking, it should have been this. Whose parents are not librarians. That's what they are implying. Alyssa made a wonderful point because in general would mean everyone, right? It's a bit of misleading. So what they mean is non-librarian parents. We want to compare the score on reading ability. That is our objective. So if you are a researcher, how would you phrase your hypothesis? The problem statement said Canadian children whose parents are librarians will have a score higher than Canadian children whose parents in general are not librarians.
If I test Canadian children whose parents are librarians, then they will score higher than children whose parents are not.
Okay, so if you recall, we are going to measure an effect, right? Our objective is to find some evidence to word our hypothesis. So that has to be our effect. I mentioned when we were talking about this at the very beginning, I was pretty bothered by the text that we used in 2023, because they would go back and forth in testing both null as well as alternative. But in practice, you always test for the alternative. That is your effect. So Renee pointed out that the research hypothesis, if I want to find some evidence to support a claim or hypothesis based on the problem, it has to be, since they used score, I'll use S1. Bad writing. First case obviously belongs to the first population, so I'll call it librarian parents. Non-librarian parents. Good.
Shouldn't the first one be the null?
What do you mean?
Because neither one of those is the null hypothesis.
We haven't gone to the null.
Oh,
So we are trying to assess an effect. And the first one, or if you read the problem statement, the Canadian children whose parents are librarians have a score higher than Canadian children in general, non-librarian parents. So all I'm doing at this point is explaining what they are. Renee pointed out, if he were to be the researcher, he would be comparing that to be greater or higher than this. Yes. So the hypothesis S1, librarian parents, reading ability score of children whose parents are librarians, non-librarians. Do we want, well, what mathematical sign would you put? Greater than. Good. That is the effects that we are trying to assess. That is the research hypothesis that we are trying to assess. So should this be the null or the alternative? The alternative. So the alternative is S. S2. Don't mistake this to an equal to sign. So fill in the blank. So greater than S2. Now that we have identified the research hypothesis, I know my alternative. I can write the null. What is the null? The null is simply a counter argument to what you have in your research hypothesis. What is the opposite of that? Less than or equal to. Good. Are we clear? One more part, I believe, it's in the text. So we wrote, or two parts. We identified the populations. We came up with our research hypothesis that is meaningful to test our statement. The definition, alternative, no, and last question, well, is this a unidirectional test or a bidirectional test? Unidirectional test, specifically which side? Right or left? Right. Good. This is a key part. You mess this up, then whatever conclusion that you will get from this point onward will all be wrong. So you've got to take your time to understand and write things clearly. Until you get good amount of experience, I would recommend that you write things down. Do I write stuff down when I try to do something? No, because all of this goes in here. But that comes with experience. So the more you practice, you don't even have to write all this stuff. But until you get to that point, I strongly recommend that you write things down. Savannah?
You found this problem in the book?
Yes.
Pearson provides? Okay.
Yeah, this is from the textbook, and it is in A. 190. Problem 3. Now there's a chance for you to try. You can pick. Let's see. Majority of friends, this is a democracy. So number 2 or number 3?
Number 3.
Number 3, give it a try. So we have to identify 2 populations that are being compared. The example that I started with in class when we started chapter 4, 1 population. Very similar to the previous example, we want a research hypothesis corresponding to the statement. Once we identify, then we can get the null and we can identify whether it's 110 or 210. So you all take number 3. So do people who have experienced an earthquake have more or less self-confidence than the general population? Again, it's a bit confusing, but what they mean to assess is more or less confident than people who have not experienced. Good. 2 populations, they have to be disjoint. That said, we'll go back here again, we don't have to use the same notation. I'm going to use C or E because earthquake. I'm going with C because self-confidence. We have two populations. One, we're going to compare self-confidence level of group 1, population 1. They have experienced earthquake. So, self-confidence level. What should the other population be? Not experienced an earthquake. Good. Now, you read that statement, it seems all kinds of confusing because they say more or less. Well, at least the example is one, and it's the exact same one. Let's say I'm talking to my friend, and if I'm explaining to them, well, if I go to a steakhouse, I'm either going to order more or less than 20 ounces of steak. Good. I don't have to explain this to my friends, they know exactly what I'll do. But more than 20 ounces or less than 20 ounces. Does that, if you think about it, the question that I can, or you can ask is, will he ever order exactly 20 ounces? I mean, but it's based on the statement, if I'm telling you more or less than 20 ounces is what I would go for. And my friend being my friend, he's all being logical and trying to observe me, right? So to find some support to the statement that I made, which is I'm going to order either more than 20 ounces or less than 20 ounces. He is going to keep track, right? And he's going to count the number of times that I didn't order exactly 20 ounces. Do you agree? Because I'm saying to my friend that it's either going to be more or less, but never equal. Agreed? So, a reasonable research hypothesis is C1 not equal to C2. More than or less than, but never equal. So, that is my research hypothesis. That is the effect that we are trying to study. More or less, but not equal to. So C1 not equal to C2. If that is the case, what is the opposite? They are exactly the same. Yes. All you have to do is negate that statement, not equal to. Is it unidirectional or bidirectional? Bidirectional. There is no subtype because if it is bidirectional, you go on both sides. Here is an example. So we are repeating the exact same type of problem. I know which one to take, but I'll show you another. And you can decide again the documents or who speaks or matter. So the first one, right here. Read. There are two more options. You are going to pick. Got the gist? It's about people solving problems. That applies to you. You are getting instruction. Taste. I have an idea which one you pick.
3.
Wow. What a surprise. Of course, 3. So give it a try. So you pick number 3. So do people who live in big cities develop more stress-related conditions than people in general? A very simple statement. That is your research question. So first thing to ask is, do we have 2 populations? Yes or no? Yes, we do have 2 populations, and what are the 2 populations? I can't hear you. Where is the sound coming from?
People who live in big cities and people who don't.
Okay, what's your name?
Tiffany?
Tiffany, okay. Tiffany is correct. So I have 2 populations. I'm leaving a space there for a reason. The second population would be people who don't live in big cities. Do you want to write it, or if you choose to write it, people in general, would it be wrong? Well, according to the problem statement, no, but do keep in mind the list of points that can't be overlapped. So by in general, they mean those who don't. Tiffany gave us the 2 populations, but to be specific, what are we interested in?
Stress-related conditions.
Very good, stress-related conditions. Until you get a good grasp of things, write it out. Once you do, doesn't matter, as long as you get it right. So what is the research statement or question that you're wanting to answer? Do people live in big cities develop more stress-related conditions than people in general? I've simplified the statement, wrote it in terms of notation. So how would you translate that research question to a statement?
People who live in big cities develop more stress-related conditions
So
than people in general.
what sign would you put?
Greater.
Okay, So we have identified the research hypothesis. Research hypothesis is the effect that you're trying to assess. H1, HA doesn't matter. So the research hypothesis, the opposite of that will become our reference. What is the opposite of S1 greater than S2? Very good. Is the test bidirectional or unidirectional? Unidirectional. What is the test type?
Right.
Writing. As I went around, I observed that some of you had difficulty in identifying the type. Easy. Once you get the research hypothesis and write it down mathematically, look at the sign. If it is pointing to the right, right hand. Left arm points to the left, left hand. If you put not equal to, it's not pointing anywhere. Good. But there is no subtype when you consider a bidirectional test. Are we clear with that part? Yes?